start the groundwork, Shahzad, it would be really nice if you can differentiate some basic definition between stress, worry, anxiety, and depression, so people understand when they're talking about it.
Okay, I'm glad to. Basically, people have a misconception sometimes that there's no difference between talking to a therapist or talking to a friend, etc. And however, I want to point out that mental illnesses are discrete medical conditions and should not be confused with worry or just day-to-day stress, and particularly this stress of loneliness and isolation in this time. Stress is something like if you're having some difficulty with your boss, or some difficulty, your risk of losing job, or in marital difficulties, difficulties with your children. These are your stressors. They can affect your sleep. They can make you feel anxious or worried about it. And worry essentially denotes something inside your head. In other words, it doesn't affect your body as much. You're worried about, you're thinking about it, and generally we use the term ruminations. So basically that can be normal, but worry can also be part of an anxiety disorder, which affects both the body and the mind. The body symptoms could include a rapid heartbeat, feeling jittery, restless, anxious, shaking, biting your nails. So when you have bodily symptoms together with the worries, and it persists for several days to several weeks, it could spill into generalized anxiety disorder. So I've defined as stress. The stresses are outside circumstances in your life, and that basically can provoke worries, which is normal. But when worry accompanied by anxiety in the body, that can spill into generalized anxiety disorder, and then that can be a situation where you may need to talk to someone to see if you can reduce it by talking. Various forms of talking, like interpersonal therapy or cognitive behavioral therapy, etc. Depression, on the other hand, is a condition in which you have a persistent 7 to 14 days symptoms of intense sadness, crying, difficulty getting out of bed, not eating, not sleeping, and presence of some suicidal ideation or thoughts or death wishes, etc. So these are the differences between stress, worry, anxiety, and depression. Once it becomes a medical condition like generalized anxiety or even panic attacks, which can make you feel like you're having a heart attack and may want you to go to an emergency room, these conditions have to be medically evaluated. So hopefully that helps.
Thank you, Shahzad. So the first question I want to put to Sangeeta is, children are watching TV, communicating on WhatsApp, emails, experiencing classes online, which, we're in a state which none of us have experienced, at least in our lifetime. The new generation has to deal with pandemic. And as a parent, what should we do to have a normalcy in life?
So Manoj, thank you for starting a discussion on this very important topic. Kids are feeling this sense of heightened anxiety and stress and sense of loss, because they have lost all their important events that they were hoping for at this time of during this time. And parents being at home, trying to deal with the loss that these children are experiencing, dealing with their own losses, with probably job anxiety, financial stress, not being able to see their own parents, grandparents. So the children are experiencing all of this stress, and often parents don't realize it. And it's starting to manifest deep down inside of them, and they're angry, they have attitude, and parents think that if they're angry at them or yell at them, that they'll, that would be a good way to help bring down the situation. However, we're seeing that that is not really a very helpful way for parents to respond. Parents need to validate their children, listen to them, and really be open to see what it is that's really bothering them and address it firsthand with them.
Thank you. Sanjeev, focusing on the state of the affairs right now, it is one of a kind. Many in lockdown. I mean, we are having cabin fever, and we read all these news. Even since we are all, the first generation from India, migrant workers had to walk miles to reach home. Hospital capacity is full everywhere here and in India. How can we deal with day-to-day life? Like, how should we, like adults, as adults, even adults, how normalcy?
Well, the sense of normalcy is what has been disrupted across the world for everyone, pretty much. So regaining that sense of normalcy is what I think people are trying to do. And one of the important things that has happened in this is that the usual ways that helped us to dispel our stress or stressful situations, for example, either getting together with people, being able to have an enjoyable experience is always one antidote to stress. So that's why people tend to, after a stressful week, may want to do things over the weekend. All of those things are not available. So that is one problem that has happened. In terms of not being able to travel, not being able to get things, meet with people that have helped us to deal with it, isn't happening anymore. So connection between people, sometimes it is connection like this even, has been finding ways to maintain those connections with people where you can either speak to them, talk to them, doing events that are like together to some extent, has been, will always be helpful in dispelling some of this stress. So I think sometimes some of these protests, and I truly wonder that even though they are driven by causes that people believe in, but at times they are for this lack of this social togetherness or being able to be with somebody, is part of what brings some of these people to these crowds. So I think maintaining that connection with people becomes quite critical.
Nice to know that. I mean, what some of the things which we have been doing is, of course, making sure that we are not on TV all the time. We do switch it off, and we do work and work on other tasks or chores. We cook together, and definitely, me and my wife go for a long walk in the evening. And being connected, we do talk to our friends very often, family very often, keep asking them how they're doing. So we're trying to, that's how some of the ways we are trying to be normal and positive, and always planning for the future. So thanks a lot. That was good to know. So Shahzad, during these trying times, does helping others also provide mental healing?
Yes, of course. First of all, it takes away the mind from your own from your own difficulties, and helping others, being empathetic, etc., is not only helpful to those you do, but in general, a sense of well-being that it generates can improve your own sense of worry, anxiety, etc. And then there's a sense of gratitude. For example, when I think of others, for example, people who have lost their jobs or people who are extremely isolated, it's sort of focusing on people who are less fortunate than you can be extremely good and a win-win situation for both parties. So yes, I do think that it does help, and it also reduces your own loneliness plus the loneliness of others. People don't realize that even without the COVID or pandemic, isolation and loneliness is roughly equal to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. So loneliness or isolation is a major risk factor for dying early. And so helping others is basically maintains a social contact.
So there was a very beautiful article on Washington Post, and that says that a lot of people who have lost jobs have joined hands in the World Central Kitchen, and they're going out there, and all these young professionals, and some of them wrote very good articles about how their life changed and what they didn't know them about themselves, and feeling relieved. So I think Vikram has a question. Vikram.
Yeah, so this is a question from Rahul, and I think Sunaina also has something similar. So they're asking, do you feel, it appears it's more of a question for Sangeeta because relating to children here, do you feel there will be an adverse effect in the long term for children who have missed face-to-face interactions with other children? And related question from Sunaina Mehra is, are there resources out there to help parents talk to their kids about COVID and the BLM movement going on right now, all in this environment?
So Vikram, there are two parts to that. First, I think you said, are there long-term problems? Well, kids are very adaptive, and as we have seen, we adapted very well to the lockdown and the current situation. So no, children are very resilient. They can come back. They're learning to cope, and I think how the parents help them cope is going to be the key for that comeback. There are a lot of there are a lot of organizations there actually that have provided specific leaflets, very graphically, beautifully done by the WHO, the World Health Organization, that provide parenting techniques all the way from preschool to teenage, and then for themselves too. How can they cope when they're juggling their own work and helping the children with the schoolwork, as we've seen, and the children's isolation from their friends. And also understanding that, I think, Manoj, you said WhatsApp, but I think kids have gone way beyond WhatsApp now. They're using all these kind of new medias, TikTok, and they're uploading videos in their rooms. And so I think allowing parents to, or invite parents to monitor them and encourage them to come down. I use this very nice technique that it's the living room, not, the bedroom is for the bed and the living room is for living. So kids can come down into the living room, enjoy being with the family. And I think that's important for parents to have that time set to specifically address anything that the kids are going through and enjoy that time with them.
Yeah, can I add something to that? One of the things that happened inadvertently for us was our daughters who are at home now were having these questions, and sometimes they will ask questions that really didn't make any sense as to like, where are you getting this information? So what we started doing about most of the time, twice a day, and sometimes at least once a day, we have these tea times. So there's an like evening tea time where we basically sit, drink tea, and discuss whatever information we have received. So they get their information sometime from, Snapchat to, I don't know what else, and bring it there. So since my older daughter was at Hopkins, we bring in some more credible information, because just telling them this is what we believe in sometimes isn't sufficient, since they say, but I read this. So we even look at the resources where that information is coming from, where the confusion is coming from. And I think gradually it helped us to develop a better understanding and reduce this anxiety about what does it really mean for contagion to spread the way it has spread. Does it mean we can go out, we can't go out, we can go for groceries? Can you meet friends? Can we invite people? So we bring all of those things for discussion. And for what Sangeeta was saying, it started initially as just by default, but it had been very helpful exercise over time.
Thank you, Sanjeev. There's another question from Munish here.
There was a second part to it, her question. Did she answer that?
What are the available resources? Yeah, she did.
Yeah, so yeah, I mean, the American Play Therapy Association has put out a lot on their website. The APA, the American Psychological Association, the American Counseling Association, the American, and I'm specific in America, but pediatric associations, you know, they've all put out resources for kids and parents on how to talk to them about these times. There are even, you know, and we haven't talked about Black Lives Matter protests that the kids are confused. There are books that the APA has put out, the APT, the American Play Therapy Association, have put out that are specifically related to some of the concerns that Blacks have around the world. And very loving, caring, fun stories to help children understand and bring that discussion to the table. And it's okay for parents not to know everything. They can research together. They can sit down and say, okay, let's look at that. Let's really, you know, go to the website. And of course, the CDC and the WHO are great resources for all this information.
Follow up to that, I wanted to ask Shahzad, and this study has been around for a while. You know, I volunteer at the Humane Society, the animal shelter, and as soon the lockdown started, I was amazing to see that how many people came forward, and most of the animals were taken for foster care. Does having pets help with mental healing?
Oh yes, there's no doubt about that. That basically has been well documented. It for both physical and emotional well-being. You know, play with a pet, taking a dog for an exercise is basically together with the fact that people who have pets have a slightly higher or longevity of life. And emotional well-being. There's a decreased amount of depression and anxiety. And that's, you can see that people have sort of become very aware of that. There's all this request that I get for emotional support animal. And on top of that, now there are a large number of people who want to take the emotional support animal to, you know, on the planes and things like that. So sometimes it can go in the other direction. So there's all sorts of data and supporting that having pets is highly beneficial for both emotional and physical health.
I think that that also relates to one of the guest question here from Manish. His question was, how do you deal with the loneliness due to lack of human contact and overdose of Zoom or remote communications only? Perhaps pets is one of the solutions, but if there is anything else, Shahzadji.
Basically, having video contact or phone contact is actually quite beneficial in reducing loneliness, because we live in a mobile society. You know, some parents, they have children living on the West Coast and things like that. Having a phone call or a video chat can certainly reduce the loneliness. And more than 40% of the households, there's only one person living there. In countries like Sweden, 51% of the households have only one person living there. So it's an epidemic in its own right, compounded by the COVID-19, and there are ways to deal with it. I agree that reducing TV time and increasing phone and Zoom and video chat with friends and family can do a lot to reduce the sense of isolation.
I was just going to add that I think when children went on e-learning sites, what we saw, there was a trend of just shutting down. They didn't want to be on Zoom. It was exhausting for them. They were taking naps, they were falling asleep, they were just, you know, not doing their homework. We're done, they said, because even the school system started saying it's a pass or fail. They couldn't do testing, they weren't giving proper grades. So kids said, well, what's the point? And they were really shutting down. So I think the human connection is what we're seeing. Although, there's a fallacy that children are all the time on technology. And we have seen through this circumstances that children really want connection with human beings. They want people connection. And I think they're tired of technology. They really are. They don't want to, they don't want to be on their phones. They don't want to be on the computers.
Yeah, all I was going to say was that sometimes it's also important to understand like loneliness and being alone are not the same thing. So loneliness is a state of being. You can be lonely in the middle of a crowd. You can be lonely in the middle of a large gathering, or you can be alone somewhere and not feel lonely. So loneliness is what is stressful. So it's easier to say like these days when we do not have as much physical contact because of social distancing. It certainly leaves more people to be alone, but it doesn't necessarily mean that as all those people will also be feeling lonely. So it was just to highlight the fact that there are solutions to loneliness. What this has done, the social distancing part, is to force being alone, not, and the loneliness then comes further, the state of mind. And there are ways to relieve that.
Manoj, I wanted to just piggyback on the animals that you were saying, how, pets are a great resource to help someone relax. You would be surprised how just having stuffed animals, cuddling up with them has been equally helpful for a lot of children, and taking care of plants. Plants have increased in demand from all the nurseries around the world. People have taken up gardening. A lot of children are actually learning to plant and watch them grow. They were able to put seeds and nurture them and cultivate, these plants. And that in itself is really good. But because when we cultivate something, we nurture it, we watch it grow. And if we cultivate good habits, we're going to nurture them and see them grow. If we cultivate bad habits, we're going to nurture them and see them grow. So this is a great way to help children learn, and they have been learning through just gardening and enjoying plants and nature, watching birds, watching the animals that we've seen videos all around the world of animals on the streets. Kids are fascinated with that, as are adults. That all these amazing animals that are coming out.
So this is a question for all three of you, can add to it. Now, being more specific to South Asian community, when I was growing up, I would always hear from we were very reserved what to ask our parents or not to say in front of them. And the whole society is very conscious about, bringing out any mental issues, like log kya kahenge, ya phir, it was said earlier, ya log kya sochenge. And we always talked about Western societies to be very open. And we saw that. Now we are here and we see that people here are more open to going for counseling, talking about their issues. Even a stigma, there's no stigma attached to divorce or several other things which are in our community. So for them, how do we deal with that with our kids, with our own feelings, to be open about communication and, to do counseling? Counseling is not bad. And it had helped me, actually. I've gone to do counseling with my son, with my ex-wife, and I discovered a lot about myself, and I felt much relieved and happy. So would you like to make any comments on that, please?
I can start maybe. One of the things I find is I consider some of these things to be as like a taboo subject. Mental health is one of the taboo subjects. Sometimes you find issues with sexuality are taboo subjects. Issue with race, discrimination can be taboo subject sometimes. So to the first part of discussing any taboo subject is typically to make other person feel comfortable and provide what we consider like a safe environment. So a lot of in therapist offices, sometimes these things are easy to talk about because they create a safe environment. They know what is being discussed is private. They know what is being discussed is not, they're not going to be admonished or yelled at for bringing up subject like that. So within a family, I think providing that safety where such topics can be discussed is probably the first step. Like your disclosure that you have been in therapy in your family, if you were to, bring it up for a child who may be hesitant about it, the fact that you have gone through it will make someone much more comfortable talking about what they are struggling with. And if, since a lot of us may not have also considered therapy as option for ourselves, or counseling or medication or seeing a psychiatrist, talking about your own struggle, that I have suffered from this anxiety, I have been frightened. Children growing up will take parents to be like know-it-all, all powerful, like nothing can go really wrong with them. There is that image from a very young child growing up. And to be able to speak that, yes, you are also vulnerable, that you have struggled with it, that you failed in college, some classes, which I find is very, very comforting when a child is struggling with a class, that you can come up and say that, I have gone through these failures. So it brings more comfort and a safe space to start that discussion.
We were talking about how in West people are more open, and it's a degree actually, because I think there's sense of privacy, and often people don't open up here as well. So but there's more knowledge, more information about it. So in general, I think that there is a resistance to therapy or counseling formally, even in West, not to mention psychiatric treatment. And secondly, yes, we have a sense of taboo, and sometimes it goes beyond taboo. It's like, for example, I seldom grew up hearing "I love you." People show their love in many ways. Usually by food, cow, ye cow, wo cow, this, that, etc. But actually saying that I love you, or I miss you, and things like that. So it goes beyond taboo. Sometimes it's not part of our language also. So having an openness, as Sanjeev was saying, is to acknowledge with I statements like, I went through this, I felt like a failure, I felt inadequate, or I felt this or that. It can be an invitation to share. So that's basically my two cents on that.
I would add that parents can be emotionally attached to the and we're talking about children or even other adults, and something that comes up for them can be just it would abhor them. They would just absolutely detest talking about that topic. It's too difficult a topic to talk about, and I think that's where therapy can be extremely useful, because as they've said, it's a safe place to deal with the problems and just bring it out openly and have this open conversation about it that I don't want to say minimize, but it just dispels some of the anxiety that the parent has over some of the topics that they want to talk about. Very difficult topic. And telehealth has taken off right now. As you know, nobody's going into the offices, so many new therapists out there are going to be offering continuing telehealth. They're not going to get back into their offices for years, and they found comfort of their home. They can offer this. So if some people are still thinking, I don't want to go into an office, I'm not mentally ill, I don't have an issue, I have good friends to talk to, this is a good opportunity to just sign up for telehealth, e-therapy, and bring out some of the really difficult conversations that a therapist can help you have and help
Thank you,
you.
Sangeeta. Vikram, you had a question.
Yeah, I have a question from a user. Avnish asks, have you all found that certain mental health conditions have presented more complex problems during this time? For example, if any one of you have dealt with schizophrenic patients, are they dealing with this any differently now? Or someone with bipolar disorder acting differently during this time?
Well, I am seeing most people via telehealth, and I do have a large majority of people who have either depression, bipolar, or some with schizophrenia as well in practice now. That's very difficult to say. The practical experience, the expectation was that these people might do worse than other people who have not gone through these illnesses. I think in some ways they have done worse, but it may be for a different reason.
What I found is that, yes, I've seen some worsening of mood and symptoms under isolation, but it also has made the intervention a little more difficult because I'm also doing telehealth, and sometimes when somebody is more symptomatic, interventions are difficult. For example, hospitalizations, or whether they need to attend partial hospitals, etc. Partial hospital means going to a hospital Monday through Friday, 9 to 3, and sleeping at your home. So it's a mid-step between outpatient and inpatient. So assessment and what prescription, what treatment to prescribe have also become a little more difficult. And a lot of times, body language, etc., convey the sense of distress and the amount of symptoms. Those have been a little harder to assess, in the setting of a video conference. So I hope that answers the question of the person who raised about what's going on with schizophrenia and bipolar and complexity of symptoms and treatment in these times.
Yeah, and I would add that I think family, a lot of kids, teenagers, families, extended families have been in lockdown together. And that has given them an opportunity to sit back and relax and, be comforted by everyone is slowed down in so many ways. So they have a better opportunity to talk about their feelings and, do some de-stressing exercises and focus on their emotional, physical health at this time. And that, could be an opportunity for them to learn how to cope with their symptoms through these calming exercises, calming ways, eating better, sleeping better, having some scheduling for, having a better schedule, because they're not feeling like people are attacking them or that they can rush out and, they need to be doing things that are not, not healthy for them. So this is an opportunity for them to just reinvest in their emotional, physical health.
I've had some patients who used to do like part-time work, which was a big source of from their self-esteem to their income. And a lot of those businesses have shut down, which has affected them, adversely, and maybe more so than other people who have lost their jobs, because it has been difficult for them to find such job to begin with. And so that has been, which consequently have made their symptoms worse as they go through additional stresses. That has been like the biggest change that I have seen.
Coming back to children, Sangeeta, I know you touched upon it a little bit, but how do you discipline or structure kids, like, for example, have a limited time for TV or internet? And some of them are stuck in apartment buildings. I mean, some of us are lucky that we have a yard, or we can step out and breathe some fresh air, do planting and all that. But what do these other parents do who are in these New York City or Mumbai, stuck in an apartment with children? What discipline or structure specifically? I mean, is a lot of it, like you said a little bit about it, that how do you have a fixed timing for everything?
Setting a time and a schedule is going to be key. But parents have Zoom meetings come up, or they have these social events come up, and children have their e-learning teach, and of course school's out now, so that's different. But they're on the computer playing games when now it's summer, they can't get out, they can't be running around, being in the playground, and they're stuck. So singing together, oh my goodness, there are so many different apps out there that that you can just pull up children's songs, fun songs, and they actually help you jump around, help you relax, help you breathe. These fun songs, and the kids love them. I use it for telehealth. They've been really amazing results with singing songs. Music is a great, something that brings these kids together. Dancing with them, putting on some music. Just pots and pans and spoons banging together, even for your little ones, for older ones. We've seen adults do that to, celebrate all the workers, the essential workers, but do it at home. Do it for fun. Just bang on things. And, I know people don't have access to gardens, but just putting a kidney bean or any bean, putting, a whole peanut in a bit of soil is going to result in a plant. And this is, kids watch their little plant grow and they get upset. They're putting it in the sunlight. They're, putting water in it, and they're nurturing their plants.
I don't know if from my perspective of limiting, it has been, a little bit more complicated than setting time to do something like a different activity than just to limit time onto the screen. I find that has been more helpful and more rejuvenating and enjoyable. So creating, like, for example, we have done a lot of, say, cooking together, which has been, cooking something new. I start my work a little bit later. They get up, we prepare breakfast together, we sit and eat breakfast, and I prepare that often, or they will help me with that. I think that has been one activity. And growing plants, sure. In fact, we were doing exactly what Sangeeta was talking about. We found an old plant, some soil, and put some seeds in there. It actually happened, and they do go. I mean, my kids are grown up. They're 17 and 21, so it's not like they're kids, but they go and check on it every day. Hey, are there any leaves here yet? I mean, they will take time, but they take time to come and check on it. So I find that has been more helpful, limiting to what they are doing on phone or TV. Sometimes that is literally hard. I think Sangeeta will have to answer that question better than I can.
I concur with Sanjeev and Sangeeta, is that exercising, gardening, if you have access to it, which distinguishes between a solitary activity, which does not make you feel lonely, exercising, cooking, all these things are very good. But the other thing that I wanted to focus on also, that I wouldn't worry too much about children being on the TV more, or because these are unusual circumstances, and as we were talking about earlier about how resilient children are. So basically, there was a lot of worry that playing video games is bad for you. There's actually no evidence of that now. A few years ago, we were worrying about that. So sometimes we get ahead of ourselves and worry about things being harmful before the scientific evidence is in. So at this time, excessive worry about, while all these things are good, to sort of, spending more time together, cooking, gardening, exercising, and etc. parental worries about excessive time on TV or TikTok or video games, etc. I would dispel the worry that it's at this point. I think it's premature to worry too much about it.
I have a sort of a question which will go towards start wrapping up. We have a few minutes left. So one of the things which I'm reading nowadays is that in China and where there have been extensive lockdown, a couple of things are happening. More divorces, more domestic abuse, and they're saying to limit alcohol use. I was really saddened to see that Indian government started all the liquor stores in a lockdown situation, which was already worse in domestic violence related issues, and having children at home and the whole atmosphere gets a little bit challenging. So first, your statement on that, and then where people can go for help, where can they call and what they should be doing?
Basically, that segues into what I was saying earlier about not worrying too much about children's TV, etc. Because the real concern about the pandemic and its worsening psychiatric symptoms in mental ill people, increased alcohol abuse use, increased domestic abuse, divorces. Those are the real problems arising out of this. So I think that it's a lot of times only we can monitor at this time our alcohol use and keep an eye on that. And a lot has been written about that as well. If not, I think, as I said, telehealth is also applies to substance abuse counseling. And as far as increased depression, domestic abuse, there are hotlines for all of that. There's hotlines for suicide, suicidal feelings. So those can be the first line of defense, followed by actually being seen and evaluated. So I agree that these are unique problems to the pandemic at this time, worsening of substance abuse and things like that, and just raising the awareness among our friends and relatives as well. So that these are some of the things that I would have to say.
Yeah, one of the things I would add to that is that particularly with regard to alcohol use, because that is very common and widespread in the South Asian community, both in India and here, is that there is a notion that because I'm not having any problem, because I don't look like somebody I think is an alcoholic on the street or homeless, that I don't have a problem with alcohol because I have a job or I function well. It just sort of creates a serious misunderstanding about what alcoholism is. So learning about that becomes very critical. Most patients that I see, I tell them one thing about drinking, who says that I don't have a problem with drinking, but they do drink frequently, is American Academy of Addiction Psychiatry actually has a guideline. They actually have a number of drinks that define alcoholism. And people may not agree with that, but it's a guideline from a professional body. And that number is 14, 14 drinks a week. So somebody who takes 2 drinks every evening is by definition an alcoholic. It is important to keep in mind, for some people, they say, everybody I know can drink a 6-pack without much problem. And I do it, that 6-pack 3-4 times a week. Well, that you go way beyond what the limit is for alcoholism. So it's important to know that that is the limit. And secondly, because people are at home, they are not commuting, some of them, they have more time at home. So they feel like, okay, now I have more time available for me to drink. I don't have to get up that early in the morning, so I can tolerate more of it. Well, this thing is going to end at one point. And now you'll be coming out of it without having that time with the same commute and then going through alcohol withdrawal. So problem with alcohol develops slowly, but it's really critical to keep in mind as to where it becomes a problematic drinking. It's very common for people to drink frequently, have job, keep job, and start having problem with it when they are in their 50s. They have done that same kind of drinking for 20 years, 25 years, never had a problem with it, and they can have a very successful, high corporate jobs and do them successfully. So it kind of hides the fact how much problem with alcohol they have. I just wanted to bring it up. I mean, it subsequent other problem as a result of it, from domestic abuse to other exists, but to recognize it, keep in mind that 14 drinks a week, you are an alcoholic by definition. Even
Good
if you
to
are
know. I
successful.
never knew that.
Yeah, most people don't.
I'm way
Even
below
most
that. I'm
psychiatrists
maybe
don't
4
know
or 5
that.
drinks a week, maybe even 2.
Yeah.
Okay, Sangeeta, anything to add before, and then we'll have a last closing statements.
Yes, I would add that, a lot of kids are going through custodial issues when there's joint custody. One parent is not able to, have the other person visit. So I think that's causing a lot of the stress. But, know that you can still get support from parents, from family, talk to them, arrange some sort of social distance meetings so that you reduce some of the stress that is kind of building up at home. But also know that the crisis center is open 24 hours and they take calls. Domestic abuse centers, they're available. Emergency, hospitals in the emergency units, you can always go straight there and seek any help that you need. So that's available.
Thank you. So now let's start wrapping up. Any last minute statements you'd like to make? Sanjeev, Sangeeta,
I have a
Shahzad?
question.
Okay, Rajiv has a question.
Yeah, I was keeping my question until the end. And as we call today's session as the time at the unprecedented times, the pandemic, this question is more for Sanjeev or Shahzad. With this unprecedented time when people are staying at home, working from home, getting to get on these numerous Zoom calls, video calls, etc., there's certain emotional rights that they're going through, trying to realize who are their friends, who are inviting them, who are not inviting them, who are talking to them, they're not talking to them, whether the work environment, the people are cooperating or not cooperating, they're finishing their job correctly or not. So many things go on when the people are working at home, staying at home, and mind is idling kind of a thing. Do you think those situations, the person going through those situations, can be classified into the sections of depression, mental health, or whatever, or this is more of a temporary phase of the things, and when the things improve, they will go back to their normalcy kind of thing?
Well, in terms of the, I think somewhere else this issue comes up, that when do you start to define or call something as a mental illness? So it would be wrong for me to assume that that is what the situation you are describing would be called as part of the mental illness. I find that the conflict and fear or a loss, which is also a form of fear, they are the things that people experience as stressful circumstances. So whenever they are in a conflict at work, or they fear a loss or actual loss, there are others, but those two are the major sort of factor in causing that stressful feeling. And then the feeling of the disappointment, dejection, a rejection from peer community, all of these tend to create this feeling of worries or even accentuated fear. One of the problem with them is that the fear tends to appear, it is perceived as something much bigger than itself. It distorts our sense of reality. It makes it harder to see what is real, what is not. None of those things in itself will define mental illness. So you can't say that person is suffering from depression. You could say sometimes that there is anxiety, because fear and anxiety are kind of very sort of similar physiologically. So it would be better to call it what it is the experience, adverse life experience, which is, low grade adverse life experience, which makes it difficult to be happy or relaxed. But to call
the reason I asked the question, because people end up using the word depression very loosely, and that's why I wanted to hear from the experts like you guys, because when they're anxious or when they're stressed, they use the word, oh, I'm depressed, or when they're feeling sad, they say, oh, I'm depressed. I just wanted to make that kind of a more medically statement as such from experts like you guys, Sanjeev and Shahzad, that there's a difference between the actual mental health condition of depression versus the word being used as I'm being depressed.
Another way to distinguish between what is normal and what's mental illness is what I call part B of American Psychiatric Association, DSM's criteria of mental illness, that it has to make you disabled. In other words, either in a social setting, occupational setting, or academic setting. So if you're feeling irritable, but if you're not into conflict with your spouse or coworkers or bosses, then it does not make you disabled in your social or work setting, etc. So for example, a very flippant way of sometimes that I use is say that I could believe that I'm Napoleon. However, if I can function as a psychiatrist, I don't have any problem with my significant other, my friends and others, etc. It's irrelevant what my internal thought is. So in other words, it's as long as it's not a disability, and by disability is broadly defined. So when you're having conflict because you're irritable, that is disability. So the symptom is irritability, disability is conflict, affecting your social, occupational, or work functioning. So I hope that makes a distinction that psychiatric illness or mental illness disables you at some level by interfering with your with your social functioning or work functioning. So if you can do your job and you can love, as Freud said, if you can work and if you can love, then you're not mentally ill.
Thank you, Shahzad. Any questions, Vikram, before we start closing?
Nope.
Okay.
No, not
so
anymore.
thank you very much, Shahzad, Sanjeev, Sangeeta, for your time. Vikram, Rajiv. It was a very informative session. Oh, Sangeeta, you have a comment.
Yeah, I did want to, just say that, kids are very adaptive and, I mean, this is a new normal for us. COVID-19 is not going away for a while. What we're dealing with Black Lives Matter is an ongoing struggle, fight that we're going to think. So this is a moment for us to reflect on what makes us happy, what keeps us going, and start to figure out our leisure activities, whether it's indoors, outdoors, social, interactions with others. In fact, and I didn't share this with you, but this was an amazing book that was put out by the CDC. It's called My 2020 COVID-19 Time Capsule. Anyone can do it, but it shows a coronavirus. Kids can decorate, color it, but it gives them, what are their favorite things? What are their best friends? What do they want to be when they grow up? What are they thankful for? What have they learned most from these experiences? Who are their community? What are they doing to help feel connected and have fun with others? And there is, what are they doing to keep busy? That's really important. So these, this is an opportunity to build activities, hobbies, and leisure activities that one needs to just cultivate to deal with our current times.
Thank you so much. First of all, I would like to thank Shahzad, Sanjeev, and Sangeeta. Thank you so much for your valuable time. Today's information was extremely helpful. Manoj and Vikram, thank you so much for organizing this. These kind of information is very helpful for everyone who's listening. I think, Manoj, people would spend thousands and thousands of dollars to kind of go to folks like Shahzad, Sanjeev, and Sangeeta to be talking to them. And here we are bringing these great educational services to them. So great job, appreciate it. And again, before we sign off, final disclaimer, which is important, that everything that we talked today was more of an educational series, services. If anyone in the group has any kind of a medical condition that they want to consult on, please do consult your primary physician. And with that, I would like to close out today's session.